Hi you guys, this is Rachel Kirkland here, the Modern Shaman. Thanks for being with me for another YouTube video of this week. If you're new to my channel, I always recommend that you go to my website, which is themodernshaman.net. It's a great resource. I have a lot of information for really anything if you are on this spiritual journey and path, wanting to connect to your ancient roots, whether that's through shamanism, elemental balancing, and healing practices, or whether it is learning traditional seership and psychic intuition with your gifts in terms of the psychic senses, extrasensory perception, and how to refine and develop those. I also have personal sessions and mentorship available on the website and just resources for learning. So again, that's themodernshaman.net. Check it out if you haven't already. And then down to the hub, y'all's questions. You send these in every week, and y'all have been super dedicated to this. I've been doing this for years, and y'all have been steady and constantly supportive. So thanks to you all. Thanks to sending in the questions. Really, it just tells me what's relevant and what's on the collective heart. So I'm always grateful to hear from you all. It feels like a unified sense of conversation. All right, that being said, here comes the question. Okay, Rachel, thank you from the depths of my heart for your service and guidance. I love you so much. Do you have any advice on navigating a romantic partnership? I feel so many past lives with my love. It is difficult to hold the feeling without thinking I might burst. It feels like an immense initiation. And I too sense many energies of trauma which don't serve my highest good that are releasing rapidly to support this. How can one begin solidly and in full light to explore the spiritual nature of this type of connection with their love? With sincere gratitude and reverence. Okay, that's a biggie. Romantic partnerships while being awoken and having very active psychic senses and connection beyond lifetimes and timelines. So, now let me tune into this for a second and see where we want to go. I'm just going to center myself into your question. And I'm smiling already. So let me be honest with you guys. So when I get a question, and I do this in sessions oftentimes as well, that has a bit of personal identity connected with it. Obviously, I have relationships. I'm navigating the same realm. I slow down my sense of self, my Rachel identity, and I center in and I ask Spirit to empty me of the self, of the identity of my personal experiences, so that the wisdom of Source may flow through with no filter, without the Rachel filter, right? So I was sitting down just right now, you asked this question, and I'm like, all right, before I answer this, I want to clear myself of any filters that may be from personal experience. And I started smiling, as you may have seen on the video, because the first thing that when I was reading your question and centered, and I was like, I heard, I will not empty you, I will use you. So then I smiled because I'm like, oh crap, Spirit's gonna make me talk about my own personal, my own personal life, my own personal experiences, which it would be very easy to not go there, and probably softer on my ego to just be empty of me and be pure of Spirit, but it's not the case for today. So anyways, that's the truth of what just came through. So that being said, I will share a little personal story that hopefully is relevant, because Spirit said, I will not empty you, I will use you. So when I first, if you know part of my psychic story as a seer, I got premonitions as a child, all growing up, all the time, all day, constantly seeing things, and then they would happen, and seeing things and they would happen in very regular parts of life. It was just a normal part of being me. I didn't think it was weird at all. I thought everybody was like that. You know, they would see little flashes in their head or whatnot. But I had very active clairvoyance and premonition in my waking life. And I didn't often talk about it unless I was, telling people not to do something or guiding or directing things. But I didn't have a language to identify that as unique or a psychic sense, or I just thought it was the way everyone was. So fast forward to telling people not to do something and then they did it anyways, I would get very frustrated as a child. And so that energy of frustration is a very compacting, kind of dense energy. So I began to get frustrated with people not listening to my visions. I would say, don't do that, and they would do it anyways, or you're going to get hurt, and they would do it anyways and hurt themselves, or because I just wasn't languaging it in a way that sounded wise. It sounded bossy, and it sounded like a know-it-all, because that's oftentimes when you're getting those things as a child, and you're 7 years old, that's kind of how it comes out. So fast forward, that energy began to bottle up, and I began blocking the images. I just learned, okay, these people are not going to do what I say. They're not going to heed my warning, so I stopped speaking it. So on my progression, and I share this because I do think that this is common. And even when I give lectures, I talk about this, and a lot of people resonate with this kind of experience of having gifts as a child and not being validated for them, or even scorned for them, or told to hide them. Essentially, the energy builds up, and I eventually had an inner ear stroke. My right side was paralyzed. I got Bell's palsy. A lot of the energy from the third eye right here behind the pineal and pituitary and this whole area, the inner ear, and all the nerve systems that are connected with that kind of went haywire from all of that energy that I was storing inside of me and not sharing from my visions with people. So then after that, it went through a process of healing. A lot of times that is part of the shamanic process, is being wounded in a way, physical wounding that really debilitates the physical body in order to amplify the spiritual body and take you on a very internal quest of what really matters. And so the physical body sometimes is deformed or highly traumatized or experiences. This is a very common shamanic path initiation. And after a while, I began to kind of learn to balance the physical body through a lot of activity and then journaling. So journaling was an outlet to get the energy out for me, even if I wasn't sharing the visions with others. So I learned how to kind of move that energy out of the body and not debilitate energetically from carrying so many visions inside. But I didn't really do anything with it other than that. Then fast forward many years, I decided I wanted to get back into my spiritual gifts. My children, I think this was before my children, but anyways, it was before kind of my children. I started becoming curious about past lives and seership, and just wanted to get back into my gifts. And so I did a session of hypnosis to unblock all of the blockages that I had created in my chakras from refusing to share those visions. When I did that, all of these psychic senses flooded in and started coming back, and everything came back in full force. And mostly it was because my heart and my sincerity of my prayer was like, I absolutely want these gifts back. I want them 100%. I wanted nothing held back from me. I wanted to see and know and feel all that I had access to. And spirit showed up and showed out. So I share all of that as a preface, because when that happened, I began having access to all my previous lives. I'd always kind of seen and been aware of them, but I began to get access to it in regards to other relationships and people. And so when that happened, I went through a period where it felt like every relationship that I had, whether it was with a romantic partner, whether it was with a family member, whether it was with somebody I was doing business with, somebody I was at the store, like the checkout person, I would get a vision and have awareness in that moment of past lives with those people. And because all of it was coming back in. And so I was being inundated with the timelines of how connected I was to everyone that was in my life. And when this first happened, it was really easy to kind of flood into or believe those storylines of like, everyone is my soulmate. Everyone has had this deep, deep love connection, because so many have. And we are intricately connected to so many individuals, even those that we don't, that, like I said, or like people we meet on the street or the bus driver or something like this. If we have access to multiple timelines and our clairvoyance and our psychic senses are active and completely open, then you will see that and you will have access to that sense of connection. Some of those are not so pretty. I remember, doing a real estate deal. I used to flip houses on the side to just make money on the side. And I remember doing a real estate deal, and I was signing a contract with this guy, and it went straight into this vision of a past life in London where he had raped me, and I had this horrific vision. I'm sitting here trying to sign this contract, and I'm like, my clairvoyance is very detailed, and I moved straight into remote viewing from that perspective. So I'm in the body, I'm seeing and I'm feeling and I'm smelling and I'm tasting, and I'm like all of the experiential presence of that moment. And I'm like, this is just debilitating. I cannot have this type of interaction. But the truth of why I share that too is that it also, a romantic connection was just as experientially empowered, intense. And you kind of say that, like, you're like, when I go into this, it's like a feeling that I may burst. And when you have very acute psychic senses, and those are highly activated, then you will feel the compounding of energy, just like compound interest, right? It just builds and builds. So you will feel the compounding of those timelines. And that threw me for a loop too. And it was like every relationship, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like twin flame energy, or this is so intense, and these lifetimes. And I was seeing, oh my gosh, this is connected to this, and you are my child, and this is why. Then there's this mothering, and then there's this goddess energy and I could see all of it and feel all of it. That's a kicker, right? So I share that because I think that this trips a lot of people that have been newly awakened or kicked back on their psychic senses like I did, and kind of went through a deep purging and clearing of any blockages and really activated those higher level chakra systems and opened up my sense of connection to past lives and that well of dream chakra. And when you have access to that, it is incredibly intense, and all of the connections, they are true and they are very real and they are experiential. And so that can feel very overwhelming to the emotional body, to the sensual body, to the intellectual body, of being aware of all of those past life connections. But what I want to say, and not in a negative way, but in a sense of wisdom of what I have learned here, is that you have past life connections with pretty much, I don't want to say everybody you come in contact with, but if you have had multiple lifetimes on this earth, and most of us have, especially if you're watching this channel and you resonate with my information, you're probably not a newcomer to this planet, other than maybe a starseed that has a very particular mission. If you are here, you are highly likely to be connected through many past lives. And so every connection is going to be available with that level of intensity once you are open to those connections and feeling vibrationally active to those frequencies. So don't, I don't want to say don't. Live your life the way it feels relevant for you. But I will say that I learned that it doesn't mean that every romantic relationship is your twin flame. You may have had shared unified core energy through other planetary experiences, other timeline experiences with multiple people. You may have soulmate connection with intense lessons for this lifetime, for other lifetimes that came from relational energies with individuals. And those may be present, and you have to retain a sense of wisdom in that connection, that it may be incredibly relevant, incredibly initiatory for you, meaning it may be a gateway or a threshold relationship that changes your paradigm. And yet it may not be your lifetime partner. Okay? I'm just being very real with you. Because spirit is not human in the way that we are human. And we are so human in the way we think, this is the way it should work. There should be one partner here, and I learn my lessons and I grow with them, and they're my lifetime partner, or they're my compatibility partner. Sometimes those relationships are not at all compatible to living together, or not at all compatible to being with your family dynamic if you have children, or if around your parents. Sometimes those lessons in those relationships are very volatile, and yet they are threshold, gateway, soulmate, twin flame, absolutely integral relationships for soul development. But soul development does not always translate to our lifelong partner with the white picket fence the way that Disney has, made our vision of romance and lifelong partnership look. So we can't quite you can't always put those two together. You have to have a level of discernment and wisdom to what spiritual relationships are. And let me tell you, every relationship that you have is a spiritual relationship, because your soul is spirit. And when you involve your soul in an interaction of any kind that is relational, and I mean with an animal, with the trees that you're hugging on, with the foods that you eat, I mean with your boss, anytime you engage at a level of the soul. And if you are a high vibrational being on this spiritual path, on your journey, then you should be able to engage on a soul level with anything, right? That's what we're growing through, our soul development. So you can have that level of impact, that level of emotional tears and breakdown and connection with anything, because your soul is at a vibrational refinement in its energy level, if that makes sense to you. All right, let me get back to your question, because I'm going on. It's already 18 minutes into this dang video and I haven't gotten to. All right. I think I want to share a second piece of advice, which is that there is a higher level of intelligence when you have access to all of your psychic gifts and you are capable of seeing past life, future probabilities. And I have learned this personally. There is a wisdom in the balance of when to use those things and when not to. And I hear people complain all the time about, like, oh, this life sucks. We were born into this life of amnesia and we don't remember our past lives. Oh, honey, let me tell you, when you are capable of seeing every past life, every connection, every future probability, there are things that are not wise to see. There is information that is not always beneficial to know. There is a higher level of intelligence, and maybe that rustles some feathers, but that's just been my personal experience of realizing that relationships need to develop with a level of trust, which comes from that space of wonder and not knowing always the next step of where things are going. That is a really fundamental aspect of developing a relationship. And when I first got accessibility or realized, oh my gosh, I can just sit here and meditate and literally look at any past life I want to see. I can look at any relationship and look at those past lives with that person. I just, like a curious kid, would sit for hours and look at, oh, my first boyfriend in junior high. Let me look at that, really. And then I started seeing all these past lives and, oh, this dynamic and that dynamic and what he did to me in that life. And when he was my brother, when he was my father, and then just dysfunction. And I mean, a lot of past experiences in the history of this planet are very brutal. Our history is brutal and very primal in our sense of the lessons that we were learning. Think of like the 7 deadly sins, you know, jealousy and greed and malice, all of these like really kind of dark and dense energies that have to be learned lesson wise in order for the soul to grow and develop. It's just the progression of growth, right? But the history, when you start looking at that, whew, and then I went and I looked at, oh, my college boyfriend, oh, this is why I can't let go of this, and this is why I wasn't able, and I was just totally into it for a long time. And it almost kind of took me down a rabbit hole that didn't make me available to be able to be present and move forward, because I was constantly looking at the trauma of the past. Some of that's relevant and some of it's not. And I learned that you have to glean, right? Separate the wheat from the chaff, or the chicken from the bone. It's like there's some meat that's good in there, and then there's just some bone and some fat, and you got to get rid of that stuff. Because and really the process of that refinement made me learn that I don't always want to see, and that's just me sharing. And I don't know that will stop any of you from wanting to see it. It didn't stop me. That's the truth too, right? It's like the curious kid. It's like, and I have that little rebel heart also that just like wants to know. So I'll share that wisdom, but I'll also share that your path is your own. And if you need to go down that path of curiosity and learning, be wise and have a sense of knowing like when it's good to pull out and when it's too much. When I started viewing my children's past lives after my children were born and they were having elements of trauma in their life, like night terrors or abandonment issues, like, at daycare where they would just like freak out or stuff, I'd be like, okay, I'm going home and I'm going to meditate and I'm going to want to see what past lives initiated or where that core frequency of abandonment came from, or where that core frequency that's in that night terror came from. And that stuff, you guys, it freaked me out, okay? Because my level of intimacy with my visions is done through energy melding, which is like essentially remote viewing into another body or projecting into another form. So it's very experiential, like I shared. And so I would be feeling, seeing, my children tortured, just extreme death moments. I mean, our history, like I said, has been very brutal on this planet. And that's only this planetary experience. And when you have accessibility to all of it, you soon realize the intelligence behind why we do not remember all of those things, or why we wake up from just some dreams and don't remember the dreams. And yet we still have the muscular tension from carrying that trauma that we know we had in that dream. So there is wisdom and discernment of letting things lie the way they are and dealing with, and I'm not saying be ignorant. I'm saying be wise in what you are opening yourself up to. I would say the same thing with what you watch on television, or what conversations you dialogue in that are about drama or negativity in the world. All of that energetic impact is stored in our DNA, in the cells of our bodies, in our mental neurology, and I mean, junk DNA. I mean, there's just so much there, right, that we are unaware of in latent aspects of our body chemistry and of our neurological makeup, of our subconscious. So be wise in what you open into. And the third part, I realized I don't want this to sound really negative, because your question was not negative. It sounded like you were having a beautiful experience of growth with your romantic partnership. And so my last piece of advice would be to go through that together, right? To navigate that together, to sit together in meditation and open up to your past lives together, to do healings or clearings together. You shared that some of this trauma is clearing, that is not for your highest good, through you. I would say there is something so beautiful about navigating that space together. That develops a sense of trust instead of trying to see what's going on when you have capabilities on your own. That is some wisdom that I picked up. Even navigating that realm with your children in a way when they have a nightmare or when they are afraid. And that may not be relevant for everyone, but it's the same with someone that you're in a romantic, basically an intimate relationship where you can be truthful, right? You may not be able to have that conversation with your boss or somebody you're doing a real estate deal with. But with someone that you have a level of intimacy with, your family or your best friends, your partner, to where you can say, let's sit together, let's meditate, and let's share our visions. Let's sit and do a time of processing together. Let's set the intention to have lucid dreaming tonight before we go to bed in order to understand our past life connections. And then when we wake up in the morning, let's share our dreams and process them together. It can be a beautiful space of growth through multiple timelines. And I have had that experience as well, in a sense, and that will just trampoline you both on your path, where you are utilizing and validating the intelligence that's coming through of what trauma is being released and sharing that with each other and having that discussion. What are you releasing? What am I releasing? What triggers you? What do you feel like you're experiencing through the dynamic of this relationship that is giving you freedom from all other past traumas and relationship? The sense of discussion through your spiritual growth in that relationship. And then I realized I said that was the final thing, but I'm going to say something that maybe sounds counterintuitive to that or a little bit zen, which is all of this that you're doing, right, are still on the levels of identity. And you will also get to a place where, not in a morbid state, but there's always an awareness of like, when you die alone. Even when you're dreaming with someone and you're in a shared dreaming space, like that lucid dream exercise that I just shared, you are still alone in your body experiencing that dream, even when others come into that dream, right? The death process is similar to that, right? Our meditations are similar to that. Even when we share them, our prayer space, our internal soul, and what is created outwards from here is a very personal experience. And so I will guide you to always be coming back to that. Like, what is it here for me that I'm needing to learn, that I'm needing to see, that I'm needing to grow? And make sure that you're always keeping that in balance with the dynamics of relationship. How is my soul and its participation here involving in this? What am I creating? What is in this for me? Not in a selfish way, but in a way of gleaning wisdom from the observer, from the one that is viewing the relationship as its own identity, as its own individuated expression. Because it is. It has its own heartbeat, has its own sense of life. It has its own sense of values. It has its own boundaries, and what makes it its own functionality as a relationship, as its own entity. So also having that awareness of growing together and yet always needing to grow individually from your soul perspective of like, what do I constantly ask myself this question when I meditate. Like, if I was to die today, if this was my last breath, what would I feel accomplished, or is there anything in my soul that I still want to do, that I still want to say, that I still feel like needs a little bit more refining or a little bit more time on? And that answer is different every time I ask it. Sometimes it's something that just came up with my daughter, like, you know what, I still want to have that conversation about how to lead others on the playground. My daughter can be kind of bossy sometimes. She takes after her mother. But she, so I mean, that was just like literally yesterday when I was in my meditation thinking, there's still some conversations I need to have. in that awareness, it always translates to a relational dynamic. Part of what keeps us here on this planet is our relational dynamics. And so asking yourself as the individual soul, what do I still need to do in this dynamic? And constantly keeping that conversation going between you and source, that is still relational. That's the Zen part, right? It's not about you, but it's totally about you. It's about the relationship, but it's also totally about you. And then there's also a sense of like doing it, but letting it be and observing it. That's the Zen dynamic of things that are very non-dual and yet obviously polaric and experienced through duality in this humanity. So hopefully some of that resonates and you can pick up a sense of wisdom from what I've shared, from my heart and from the lessons I'm still learning on this earth. It is just a gift to me to be able to share from my heart in a space of sincerity and humility and love. So I'm sending you blessings. We'll be back here next week, you guys, with another video. Bye.